Hello and welcome to NetXtra Insights, the membership and not-for-profit sector's foremost digital marketing podcast. Learn from yesterday, live for today, hope for tomorrow. The important thing is not to stop questioning. Hello everyone, I'm Sean Greentree and that was Albert Einstein, epitomising exactly what these podcasts are all about. Once again, I'm joined by our font of all digital knowledge, Adam Butler. Hi Adam.
Hi Sean.
By the way, thanks to everybody out there who's downloaded the podcast so far, subscribed to the various channels on iTunes and Stitcher and SoundCloud and a few other places besides. Your feedback's been great. Thank you for all the emails and suggestions for future topics. Keep them coming. We love to hear what you want us to talk about, and we certainly value your ratings and comments too. So thanks for that. Today we're here to talk about analytics, and it's again something that we get asked about quite a lot, certainly by charities and certainly memberships as well. So the purpose of this particular podcast is just to go through a few typical questions that we will get asked by the membership and charity fraternity, the sort of thing that we would get asked, sorting the wheat from the chaff, so to speak. So, Adam, just give us a little overview. What are analytics and how does it affect my website?
Basically, I think when most people talk about analytics, what they mean is Google Analytics, which is by far the most popular sort of website monitoring tool. There are other companies out there that offer similar products, such as Adobe's Omniture, but for the most part, because Google's been offering this as a free service, because they love all that data that you're reporting into their systems about how people are using a website, it's certainly taken off and become the most popular method of recording kind of website visitor data and that kind of stuff. So basically what Google Analytics does, and for the purposes of this, unless I kind of specifically talk about something else, this will all be relevant to Google Analytics, it being the free most popular tool. What Google Analytics is essentially is just, it works by you taking a specific piece of code that Google give you, you paste that onto every page in the code of your site, and then what that does is essentially track the behaviour of visitors that visit your website.
So that's every page as opposed to just the home page?
Yeah, every page you need that on. And it's a fairly simple process to go through. It's not anything you have to do manually on every page. Normally, depending on how your website's built, you'll be able to just do a batch and tell it to insert it into this particular part of the code.
Through the content management system.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so from that point, you set your tags up, you test it, and then you start getting data. You don't get information at this point. You just get data, and then it's down to the person in your organisation or at the agency that you're working with to turn that data into useful, actionable information.
Okay. I mean, you talked about Google Analytics there, and as I'm guessing you rightly point out, it's probably the most popular one. Mm-hmm. How does something like Google Analytics compare to, say, the likes of Bing? I mean, I know you mentioned other tools just then, but yeah. I mean, of course, there's Bing as well. Why would anybody choose Google Analytics over Bing?
I don't think there is a Bing Analytics.
Oh, is that? Oh.
No. It's Bing Webmaster Tools, which is actually a lot more useful than the Google Webmaster Tools equivalent. But again, the kind of data, the data that you get from your Bing Webmaster Tools is a lot smaller sample size because a lot less people actually use that to search.
Bing. Yeah, okay.
But in terms of someone like Adobe and their Omniture suite, the only experience I had of working with that was when I basically had first started getting into digital marketing, and I was working for the National Trust, and I had to deploy the entire Omniture tracking across the Holiday Cottages website.
Oh, okay.
And it was almost impossible. I couldn't make head or tails of it.
Okay.
And I think it's more for if you have complicated actions, things like a video play, really specific things that you would like to track I think Omniture is good for that because it's a paid service. The support that you get is probably a bit better than Google Analytics, but like I say, it's not cheap and it's really not easy to get the grips of. Whereas Google Analytics, you can basically install that onto your website and jump straight into it and start trying to get some interesting information out of it.
And like you say, the traffic is that much more significant anyway. So,
yeah, definitely.
Okay. Well, using, like you said earlier, the Google Analytics as the reference point here, how do I go about setting up a new account? Where do I start?
Well, if you haven't got one yet, the first step in a majority of things that you need to do online now revolves around creating a Google account. So you just go to Google and up in the top right hand corner where it says sign in or register. If you haven't got an account, you need to register one, or if you have got an account, then you just simply navigate to google.com/analytics. There's a fairly simple step-by-step process that takes you through what you need to fill out. You don't need to put any business information in there or anything like that. It's just a website to them. It doesn't need any information about your organisation, your company. And like I say, it spits out a predefined code that you need to put in that uniquely identifies your website, and by putting that code into the code of your website, whenever people view that web page that code is on, it triggers the script to take a lot of information about that browsing session. So anything as detailed as kind of the browser that they're using, the resolution that their screen's set at. You used to get obviously keywords that they'd searched for, but you don't get that anymore. Lots of different things, the different versions of the browser that they're running, whether it's a mobile device, all these kind of things that you can then start to regress and find useful information out about who's browsing your website and what they've come there to do.
And I'm guessing I know that any half-decent content management system out there should have a facility, like you said before, for adding that Google code across your site, usually in the advanced settings or the settings part of your content management system. Certainly is on the NetXtra content management system.
That's right.
But that should be a fairly easy thing to do. It's not like you need to go into source code every time.
No.
There should be a special field for that.
Yep.
Okay. Naturally, Google Analytics, I go into it, it's a minefield, especially to the beginner. How do I separate the wheat from the chaff? And at what point does information merely become data?
I think that, a minefield you could term it as a minefield, or I think the more appropriate term would probably be a potential time sink, in that you can just spend hours and hours clicking around, not quite knowing what that data is telling you or has the potential to tell you about your website visitors. So, I guess the first step would always be to set up the goals that mean something to your organisation. So step one is always going to be try to set up tracking of events and goal tracking and e-commerce if you're selling anything, or if you have anything that people book on for events and that kind of stuff. Anything that has value for your organisation you need to be tracking, because without that you've got nothing to tie all this data together with. It's all very well that you see that you've had 3,000 visitors this week, but if you don't know what any of those visitors did, if you see, okay, they've browsed on average 6 pages and they've stayed for on average 4.5 minutes, that really doesn't give you anything to go on in terms of improving your website. So basically the be all and end all of Google Analytics is correctly setting up your goals and your e-commerce, so that what you're then able to do is say, okay, the most valuable visitors stayed for 7 pages and they entered through this particular path, having been referred to the website from, let's say, The Guardian, for instance, something like that. And then what you can start to do is create content based around what seems to be resonating with your visitors and getting them to carry out the actions that have value for your organisation. So it's going to be really difficult to do that, to like you say, sort of separate the wheat from the chaff if there are no goals set up, and if you're not tracking anything, any instance of anything that has value for your website or for your organisation, then it's always going to be quite difficult. But even if you don't have the ability to do that, maybe just looking at what you consider the most important pages and seeing how often people hit those pages, where they hit those pages from, So, for instance, if you're not tracking, say, a form submission, even if you're just tracking, views to the page that the form is held on, that's still a half decent metric that gives you more to work on than just looking at the data alone. So, I guess it's the two things is A, set up goals and B, recording what's valuable to your organisation, and B, you need to have a question in mind that you want answering. If you go in to Google Analytics thinking that what you're going to get out of it is just straight knowledge about your organisation and how your website's performing, I think that's probably the wrong way to think about it. Personally, I like to think of a question that needs answering, and then that keeps you kind of on the straight and narrow. It makes it more clear what statistics and what pieces of data you need to be looking at, and from there you can go about kind of forming an answer to your question.
So it's a bit like an encyclopedia, really. All the information is there, but ultimately you're looking for answers on certain key questions or one particular question, and you will have a reference point for doing that.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's quite similar to how you would perform any kind of scientific experiment. You have your null hypothesis. So I think visitors are coming to the site and being put off by this particular page, and then you would go into the Google Analytics and see what data there is that would corroborate or dismiss that statement, really.
Okay. Well, it's interesting, actually, because we talked quite generally there about sort of the key analytics. As a beginner, a membership or a not-for-profit, what are the key analytics that these guys should be particularly looking out for? So is that, I don't know, goals for membership sign-up, or goals for tracking click-throughs for donations, or whatever that might be?
Yeah, exactly.
In your view, what should they be looking out for?
I think the sort of the industry term is to ask yourself, when are you winning? And it's when a visitor performs an action on your website that furthers the goals of your organisation. That could be anything as minor as clicking through from the website to your Facebook page, or it could be anything as obvious as tracking donations to a charity. So it's everything in between that, really, that has value for the organisation, anything that furthers the goals of your organisation. So it can be things like mentions across social media channels, which Google Analytics has the ability to kind of track that now and see where the links are coming from different social media channels. Things like form submissions is always a good one, because obviously a lot of membership organisations and that kind of stuff go by leads, and a lot of charities have leads in terms of their kind of major donors and all these kind of things. So it's really thinking about what has value, but the other side of that is to actually sit down at your end as a charity or as a non-for-profit and actually work out what the value is in a monetary form. So if we imagine that a charity has a form on their website where they say, if you're interested in becoming a major donor, fill out this form and a representative will get in touch with you. Now, just having that set as a goal is fine, but what you really need to know is what is the value to your organisation in a monetary form of someone submitting that form. So the process that you would have to go through at your end would be to say, okay, of every 100 forms that we get submitted inquiring about becoming a major donor, our sales team or our major donor fundraising team has closed 20% of those. So you have a 20% conversion rate on your form submissions. And so what you would then do is take the amount of money that's been generated from these major donors off this form submission, and then you assign that within Google Analytics as a monetary value. So what you then start to see is not only these people that have, for instance, come from the Guardian website who are over 50, not only can you see that, okay, they've completed goals, it actually gives you like a benchmark or a point, a real key progress indicator in the truest sense, because you're getting a fairly accurate measure of value that is being generated from this action that doesn't necessarily have a monetary value unless you assign it to it. So that gives you so much insight when you look into these Google Analytics figures that it's almost difficult not to pull out relevant information that will help guide your business knowledge. So
I guess for every organisation, as I think we said on the last podcast, it's kind of horses for courses between different organisations. So what I would say, again, without frantically wave the NetXtra flag on this, I mean, Adam is always here, and it's something we've helped other clients with, and certainly can advise you if you've got if there's particular goals and things that you guys should be looking at. By all means, please get in touch. Okay, we touched on just now, you mentioned social media things that analytics now tracks.
Yeah.
I mean, when I wrote these questions many moons ago, the Google Analytics platform as it is today was relatively new. It's not now. I guess it may even be 6 months old, maybe longer than that. What is there in the new platform that we should be getting excited about? Like I say, you mentioned social media tracking and that sort of stuff. I'm sure there's other stuff that we could benefit from.
Yeah, I mean, some of the more interesting stuff now that's kind of coming out of... I mean, there's two things that personally I find really interesting. The first being the new kind of demographic information that you're given within Google Analytics when you turn on your display advertising tags. It might require you just to update a little bit in your Google Analytics code. But basically what that gives you is it gives you information about the visitor's age, the visitor's interests, their gender, and all this kind of stuff that you can start building a picture of the visitor with. So, like I mentioned earlier, we don't get keyword information anymore from a majority of searches. You still get that if you're operating like PPC, paid search advertising, that kind of stuff. But what you don't get nowadays is if someone comes to Google, they just search a particular term that doesn't have your brand in it at all. You won't get any information about what it was that person searched for, and you can get a decent understanding of potentially what they search for based on the page that they land on and this kind of stuff. But really that was always quite abstract data to work with anyway. It gave you an idea of what people came to the site to do and possibly based on their behaviour kind of who they were, but really it didn't give you too much insight. So what Google have done nowadays is they're taking, as I mentioned earlier, you log into Google. Most people have a Google account now, and what you do is basically when you're searching Google or when you're visiting different websites, Google kind of takes that into account, and it assigns you an affinity category, it's called, and it also assigns you an in-market category within the kind of Google Analytics reporting suite. You can actually see this stuff now. So what's interesting about that is you have kind of, like I say, the in-market segment. And so what Google's done here is they've, with the billions and billions of website browsing sessions that they have access to within their data, I think Google probably have the best idea of the conversion process than anyone else in the world at this point. And so what they can start to understand is when someone's kind of at the top end of that conversion funnel. So if someone's recently bought a classic car, let's say, and they're looking at how to do it up, Google would kind of start to understand that this person would be primed to be hit with advertising for classic car stuff. And so what benefit that has is just immeasurable almost, because when Google starts to refine this and perfect this, because it's not quite there yet, but when they start to refine this, what you can start doing when you have your goals set up, your e-commerce set up, and let's say you're a charity that's running a Google Grants PPC campaign, what you can essentially tell Google to do is send me the most relevant traffic of people that are looking to support a charity, for instance, because it sounds like alchemy almost, but it's genuinely they have that much insight into people's behaviour that they can tell that someone's looking to perform this certain action. So what it can do is really, really kind of hone in and make your marketing communications a lot more efficient. And the same goes with the other thing. You have these two. You've got the in-market segment, which is what I just described, and you've got the affinity category, which says that this person is kind of not necessarily in the market for and not necessarily primed to buy anything, but they're a digester of that information, that particular type of information. So whether it's kind of someone who's really into photography, Google calls them shutterbugs within their reporting and that kind of stuff. But it just really unlocks a whole world of potential when it comes to kind of segmenting your website traffic and actually kind of starting to build a persona of the different types of website visitor that you have. And then when you have that, and you're happy that you've segmented this traffic accordingly and it's actually working for you, what you can then start doing is creating content, creating pages specific to these particular personas, and then what you can start getting is a lot more value from your website, really.
Okay.
A lot more value.
Okay, sounds good. How and why, going off at a slight tangent,
Right.
how and why would I use A/B testing? Kind of explain to us what A/B testing is and how and why I would use it.
Yeah, A/B testing is again one of these things. I think that's more of a minefield than Google Analytics, because once you start to understand what A/B testing is, unless you fully see the research and the planning of that through, you can really start to confuse yourself. So basically the basics of A/B testing is if you've got, let's say, I mean it's mostly used on search advertising. So one of the benefits of kind of PPC is that you get to tell Google what page you send this particular search visitor to. And so the idea of that would be to send them to a page that you know is going to increase the odds of them converting and actually buying something or carrying out one of these actions that has value for your organization. So one of the ways to test how well this page is going to convert people is to have two different versions of it. Now, what people might be tempted to do when they think of running an A/B test and having two different pages served to random visitors is to change the pages completely, and you have two completely different designs. Now, that doesn't really give you the insight that A/B testing is designed to give you, because the idea behind it is to say which element of the page works. So you always kind of hear these stories about, you know, we increased our turnover by 40% by moving this particular button higher up the page and that kind of stuff. The thing you really need to be conscious of when you're thinking of undertaking an A/B test is your information, is your conclusion going to be scientifically sound? And so by that I mean you need to be aware, you need to say for certain that what made the difference and why, and what that can start giving you again is a lot more insight into who's buying and who's carrying out these actions. So basically the way it would work is that you would say, okay, I'm going to A/B test this particular page, and what you want to bear in mind is that there's a lot of different entry points into that page, so you need to take that into account when you're reporting on these and kind of bear that in mind throughout this, because your results may be skewed depending on how people have accessed that page in the first place. You know, if someone's come from your home page to the particular page in question, that's a lot different than coming from a search engine to that page.
Right.
So that's point one. Point two would be that you only change one or two things, keep it very simple, and over the course of, let's say, 3 weeks, or you know, a statistically significant amount of data that you can gather. So, like I say, 3 weeks, or you know, a few thousand visitors. What you should start to see is that when you're looking at the different kind of conversion rates of these two pages, that one would be different to the other, significantly different. So if there's only like 2 or 3% difference in real terms between the two conversion rates, that's probably not worth paying too much attention to over the, you know, if you've only got, say, 100 people that have come through and done that, that's probably not enough people to say for certain that, okay, making this change will actually improve the visitor journey and actually increase the money that they spend with us or the value that they bring our organisation. So yeah, that's the kind of the basics of it. You just have two different pages that you serve to two random sets of visitors, and you see which one comes out on top, really.
So, okay, leading on from that, how do I then assess the engagement or the value of any given visitor? That might be a potential member, I'm guessing, or a potential donator, or whatever it might be.
Well, I guess it's quite hard to actually measure engagement straight through Google Analytics, because measuring engagement is important, but you need to understand whether it's positive or negative engagement. So if someone's come to your website because they've seen a bad news article, they visit 10 different pages, they stay for 15 minutes trying to kind of dig up dirt on your organisation or your charity or anything like that, and then leave. As far as you know, through Google Analytics, that's an extremely engaged person who's come to your website, loved what they've seen in your eyes because they've viewed 15 odd pages and stayed for ages. But in reality that person, isn't valuable to your organisation.
No.
So the whole point is basically you can have kind of engagement metrics. So if there isn't anything on your website that necessarily you want people to do, whether it was book events or donate, anything like that. I mean, one thing that we've set up for a few of our clients is just things like tracking document downloads and using that as a key progress indicator to engagement, because it would indicate, which is what the I in KPI stands for, that people are engaged because they're downloading these documents. Now, the way it's set out is that you have your sort of preliminary information on the page. If that's relevant, then the person would download a document. If it's not relevant, they wouldn't be incentivized to perform any further actions. And that is kind of why bounce rates were seen as useful as they were, but it's kind of started to fade now, and as digital marketing's kind of moved on and our understanding...
Sorry, you mentioned bounce rates there. Just quickly for the people who don't know, bounce rates are people that come to your website and disappear after one page visit. Is that right?
Yeah, pretty much, yeah. I mean, it's basically if someone navigates to a page and they don't click a link on that page, then they press back in their browser, regardless of whether they go off the site or not.
Right.
That's still seen as a bounce, and that's generally something that's quite negative. And if you can set your website up to bear that in mind, so every page, if possible, should have some sort of call to action or be incentivizing someone to do something that you can measure, because that makes the whole thing a lot easier to understand as to whether your audience is engaged.
So it's not necessarily about time spent on the site, it's more about tracking the goals and the conversions.
Exactly. Yeah, and if there is anything that you can identify on your site, such as a document download or such as viewing a map listing for an event, something that just indicates that someone's gone above and beyond and is more likely to have value for your organisation, that tends to be a pretty decent, sound metric to go by.
You've mentioned a couple of times here, and I know you mentioned it in the context of Bing once, and I think you've also mentioned it in terms of Google. Google Webmaster Tools, what is it, and should I be using it? I'm guessing the answer to that is yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So if you think about Google Analytics is basically telling you what people to your, how people are interpreting your website, how they're behaving, and that kind of stuff. Google Webmaster Tools does the inverse of that, where it tells you and explains to you what Google's doing with your website. So I mean, that's the other half of this whole kind of search ecosystem, is you've got your visitors and you've got your website, and so you need to know how the visitors are interacting with the website, how they're finding it. But you also need to know what Google makes of it and how many times it's serving up links to it and that kind of stuff. So there's some really important stuff that both Google and Bing Webmaster Tools will tell you. And some of the more important things to look at would be things like crawl errors. I mean, the way Google kind of finds out about your website, finds out that it exists and all this kind of stuff, is they have these programs that are very basic but very effective. And what they do is essentially click every link on your website and then report back certain pieces of information about that page straight into their database, and then it has their whole ranking algorithm that goes along with that. So what Google Webmaster Tools can tell you is how often your website was crawled by these robots or spiders, as they're kind of called. It can tell you how many times your website has been shown in Google search results, the amount of times it's shown versus the amount of clicks. So that's the kind of...
Is this over and above what you can get in analytics already, I take it?
Yeah, definitely.
Or
because like I say, analytics kind of gives you the visitor's view of your website, whereas Webmaster Tools is telling you what Google's doing with your website. Yeah. So you can also do a lot of useful things within Google Webmaster Tools, like defining what pages you want shown, or if there's any pages you don't want shown. If you have old pages that you want removing from Google's database, you can do that.
Okay. So
there's lots of useful stuff there, and chances are you're not going to do anything that kind of breaks the site or anything like that. So it would be good to have a play about with Google Webmaster Tools.
Okay.
Yeah, and it kind of works in the same way, where you have to just put a tag on your website.
Sure.
And then Google Webmaster Tools knows that you're the owner.
Excellent. Okay. We talked, and I'll probably bring Google Webmaster tools into this. Where can I learn more about Google Analytics? Where can I learn more about Google Webmaster tools? And also, are there any other analytics tools that may be worth a look as well? I mean, you mentioned the Adobe.
Yeah, I mean, I really couldn't say that there's any other analytics suites out there that would top Google Analytics in terms of the price and the kind of return on investment that you're able to get from it, and the quality of the reporting. Like I say, Omniture is good, and I know that people like the BBC website use Omniture and that kind of stuff because it gives you the ability to track a lot more goals and a lot more actions than maybe Google Analytics does. But in terms of, I guess, where you can learn about all this stuff, I mean, I started off and I read, and I'm probably going to pronounce his name wrong, but I think it's Avinash Kaushik. He's got a couple of books called Web Analytics, An Hour a Day, and the sequel to that, which were massively popular kind of 5 or 6 years ago because it was really a how-to guide. And I think he's now set up his own, in conjunction with a few other people, an actual kind of digital marketing school that has a full curriculum and that kind of stuff. So, his blog is called Occam's Razor, and that's always a really good kind of go-to source of information, in particular for Google Analytics.
I would add to that, sorry, just to interject there. There's a guy that I follow, certainly on his podcast. It's an organisation called Target Internet, a guy called Daniel Rolls, and another guy called Kieran Rogers, both excellent digital marketeers, talking more from probably a commercial perspective, but gives some really good overview, not just of digital marketing, but there's certainly some good podcasts and reading material out there. I know Daniel's certainly released a new book recently and has done others as well. So I'd certainly point you at Daniel Rolls, Rowles, and Kieran Rogers as certainly good two guys who give some great information.
Yeah, that's fine. There's a wealth of information out there, though, and I mean, you're never going to go too far wrong if you actually just check the Google Analytics help section, the FAQ section, and that kind of stuff. Yeah, there's plenty out there, and I think depending on what it is you're trying to do, a well-formed Google search will definitely be your best bet, kind of 9 times out of 10, because it's all something that any digital marketer has struggled with at some point or other throughout the career. I mean, no one kind of really went to university to learn this stuff, so everyone really did start off as an amateur at some point, and has asked questions, and so the community is always quite willing to help, and is always, I think, seems to have gotten a lot better at actually explaining these kind of quite complicated concepts and how it relates to your organisation and the value that it can bring, and kind of what to do off the back of finding out this information. It's all very well knowing something, but then knowing what to do in relation to what you've just found out can be the biggest hurdle, and I think people are starting to understand that and kind of feed that into their explanations of how to perform a certain task and this kind of stuff. I mean, you've got Omniture. I know that HubSpot are doing quite big things within the industry now.
Would I be right in also saying something occurred to me as you were talking there about Omniture and even HubSpot just there?
Yeah.
Is that and of course Google Analytics as well? Am I right in saying is there a danger of using too many at the same time? So you're comparing apples with pears. So using data from Google Analytics isn't necessarily right by using that information and holding it up against, say, Omniture.
Yeah, possibly. Yeah, I know that there would definitely be discrepancies within those figures, because something like Google Analytics, it doesn't look at every single visitor. If you have more than, let's say 5,000 visitors a week, it will only take a subsection of those visitors that it's supposed to reflect that. Whereas I think Omniture probably would be taking every single visitor into account. I think any data source that you can look at will always be more beneficial than not looking at it. But if you don't bear in mind that you have set out to answer a specific question, then I think it could probably take you off at a really difficult, dangerous tangent that you might not recover from. Always key to bear that in mind.
Okay, Adam, as always, thank you for your time. Thanks for your help. Guys, thank you again for your comments, your feedback. Please keep them coming in. Next month, something that we got a lot of feedback from after the first SEO podcast was I think a lot of people out there want to know a bit more about pay-per-click marketing and specifically, especially for you charities and you guys with charitable status, the Google grant stuff. So I'll be dragging Adam back screaming and shouting, no doubt, to talk through pay-per-click marketing, how we go about that, a beginner's guide perhaps, and specifically, you know, the benefits, the pros, the cons, and what you need to be looking at in terms of Google grants and all that free or potentially free pay-per-click marketing stuff.
Yep.
Okay, thanks, Adam.
Cheers, Sean.
Appreciate that.
Thanks
and until next time, guys, thanks again, and we'll see you again shortly.
Well, that's it for this week. Thanks again for taking the time to download this podcast, brought to you by the nice folk at NetXtra, the membership and not-for-profit sector's leading digital marketing experts. To find out more of our other podcasts, simply search for us in iTunes or visit our insights pages at www.netextra.net/insights. Membership or not-for-profit organisation and want to find out more about our digital and online marketing products and services, please do call us on 01787 319 393. And for those of you outside the UK, simply dial 441787 319 393. You can also browse our website at www.netextra.net, where you'll find loads of information about what we do and, more importantly, who we do it for.